Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Shalini. So first of all, welcome to everybody who decided to join our session. We're really excited to see you here. To give you just a little bit of background on the relationship between Base 11 and Moreno Valley, we're both going to introduce ourselves. Most of this time we want to spend talking with you and around the discussion questions. So we're just going to preface a few things and then dive into the discussion questions. So as Amy introduced me, I'm Ingrid Ellerbe, Executive Director of Base 11. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Base 11, we started in 2015 and really focused on two key areas all the way 5 years ago. So one of those was the growing STEM talent pipeline crisis, and that was getting worse because of lack of representation of minorities and women. And the second was the lack of a sustainable middle class in America. And I think that our entire discussion today has really underscored that when we talk about upskilling and reskilling and the importance of that as we move forward. Base 11 started by just looking at the problem and saying, okay, what do we think is in the way of us moving forward and getting people to move forward within this? And it was what we thought were three areas: a lack of awareness, a lack of access, and a lack of belief. So awareness, first of all, that STEM jobs and opportunities exist for jobs and entrepreneurship, access to resources and the facilities that are needed, and belief that they can actually be successful. So one of the first things that we did is we started building state-of-the-art innovation centers. And that is how I met Dr. Graveen and the folks at Moreno Valley. We also develop project-based STEM programming. We have about, I'm going to say at this juncture, 50 to 60 academic partners and corporate partners across the country. And we work collaboratively with them in relation to what needs to be done in order to develop a STEM pipeline that is well suited for different corporations in different areas. So I'm going to stop there and let Melody introduce herself.
Hello, everybody. I'm Melody Graveen. I serve as the Dean of Instruction for Career Technical Education and also for now the School of STEM at Moreno Valley College. And very excited to be here today. Meeting Ingrid of Base 11 was one of the best things that ever happened to us. About 4.5 years ago, Moreno Valley College was fortunate enough to win a Title III STEM grant. We're a Hispanic serving institution. About 70% of our student population is Latinx. And so our goal was to incorporate a makerspace, project-based learning, hands-on learning into our STEM curriculum with the hope of attracting more students into the STEM field. I'll be honest with you, when you're starting a makerspace, there's a lot of people that do a lot of different things, anything from things in a library to things on carts rolling down the hall to I don't even know what all else. And so we didn't really know what we were doing, and we looked for somebody that could help us figure it all out. And so we sat down with Ingrid, who helped us bring in all of our constituents, including our business partners, to talk through what it was that we needed here in our area to help people get their hands onto equipment that might help them to either upskill in jobs, reskill in jobs, or to become entrepreneurs, which is a huge piece, a small business piece of the area that we serve. So that's how we met. I'm lucky to have met her, and that's how our relationship got started.
And that's why we have matching purple hair.
That's right.
So we're very close. So one of the things that I just want to talk about to start with is just in general with upskilling, reskilling, and even I'll say pre-skilling, choose your partners wisely. And so basically, when we started with Moreno Valley, they first actually had something that's more in the pre-skilling space, which is the iMake Mobile Lab. And from the iMake Mobile Lab, then we began to build out into the current makerspace that's there. Part of what we did is a full design process in order to get here and to involve exactly what Melody just said, which was the local community, including the local corporations. It was just extremely critical that they be in that process. And then Melody, you want to talk about, so lab built, everything beautiful, life great, and now what?
Well, it was interesting because everything was beautiful. We actually opened this space in December of last year, so it's been open for 1 year. And then on March 13th, the state of California shut down. And so we had a space that we had actually been inviting our business partners, our city partners. We work very closely with the Economic Development Division in our city of Moreno Valley. And next thing you know, we can't be in the space anymore, and we can't have people in the space anymore. So we sat down and tried to figure out what could we do. We needed to be in a virtual space, so we added a third version of the makerspace, and we called it the virtual makerspace. So we wanted to serve both our community partners. We wanted to help our K through 12 partners because schools had shut down. Parents were having to teach things that they didn't have any idea what they were doing with teaching. And so we did a few things. We created kits. We created some free online learning. We marketed some coding camps so that we could get people, and it's interesting, our coding classes have had anywhere from 10-year-old to well over 40 coming into the class and learning how to code in Python and those kinds of things that are skill sets that we need in this area. So we had to really turn on a dime and try to figure out what we needed. We're also lucky that we have an advisory committee, and our advisory committee consists of our stakeholders, including our industry partners, and they joined us for the virtual advisory committee most recently to help make sure that we put equipment in that makes sense and that we're training people for the skills that they want to hire for.
Thanks, Melody. So I think that gives you guys just a good contextualization of our partnership, you know, how we met, how we work together. And we really want to spend the majority of this time with the facilitation of discussion. And so what I've done is basically, oh, and the other good news is we don't have to nominate anybody to report out because Dr. Graveen has already volunteered to do that. Unless one of you wants to say, no, please let it be me. Just let me know. Anybody? Anybody? Okay. So let's take the first discussion question. So upskilling and reskilling opportunities are particularly beneficial to improving diversity, inclusivity, and retention in the workplace. And we have seen this over the work that we've been doing in the last year specifically. It can particularly benefit the underserved and underrepresented populations, those returning to the workforce, people that have lost their job, whether it's due to technology, and I'm going to add, or COVID. I have a lot of people saying, gee, I wish I had that job, I could work from home. So how can, let's just have an open discussion about how can project-based learning be leveraged to sort of speed this up? You know, ideas, things that you've seen. What are some of the considerations that you have to take into account when you're developing these programs? Anybody?
And for those of you who aren't on video, please feel free to get on video so we can have everyone's beautiful faces up on the screen.
Yes, please. Nothing?
Maybe it's a huge paragraph, so we'll give everyone
That could
a
be
second.
It. Yeah.
You know, Ingrid, I'll share that one of the things that was really interesting to me when we first started out talking about a makerspace and project-based learning, we had one of the schools, it's the Colton Redlands Yucaipa Regional Educational Program, that was doing a lot of work with design thinking and project-based learning. And they started the first day of class that they brought a basket of stuff in and had people make something. And you saw anything from these design wonders like a Ferris wheel that had a motor and turned to people that drew pictures, those kinds of things. And so some of that project-based learning piece helps to sort of create a more equitable playing field, at least from what I've seen, because people can work to their strengths.
Yeah, I agree. And Melody, I'll add to that. I think that one of the things that I've seen particularly that you guys are clued into with the iMake Innovation Lab is that you're attracting your local community, you're attracting your students and your returning workers, and you have a very diverse population in Moreno Valley. I think that having them exposed to the possibilities so that they could actually see what area could I go into if I want to go back into the workforce. You know I've done what I've done. We just heard the guy from Microsoft say that he started off as one thing and it ended up as another. Great example of, if you don't know that it's out there, you don't aspire to it. So I think that that's one of the value adds in looking at basically just bringing in this sort of design thinking and innovation opportunities and exposing that to the students at Moreno Valley, but also to the surrounding community.
I wanted to add that what I've seen really be effective is having not necessarily project-based learning assigned to a semester or a particular project, but actually having like open opportunities for people to monkey around and play around and just touch things and explore things, and not have a product that they have to create that they feel that they're going to get graded on. So really just sort of an open learning space. I've seen that in community centers and boys and girls clubs, at TGR Learning Lab for younger students, but I think that that's true for older students as well. If the very first time we're going to try and do something, we know there's a grade attached to it, then there becomes fear attached to that, or imposter syndrome that we just talked about the other day. Somebody feels like, oh, I'm not supposed to be doing this. Whereas if it's just like, please play, touch, enjoy, try this out, and there's not, I would love to see, I think you guys know what I'm trying to say. And so I would love to see more opportunities where adults can just come in and play, and awaken their curiosity and understand that, gosh, this is really pretty fun, and it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I'll add to that.
Have any experience with that?
Janine, you're in my head right now. And the reason you're in my head is because I'm thinking about, you're always in my head, but I'm just thinking about the fact that you're talking about upskilling and reskilling workers of a certain generation. That generation is very parochial in nature. You do your job and you do it well. And if you don't do it great right out the box, then you fail. Part of this process is really getting people's mindset around the fact that it doesn't work that way anymore. You get to try, test, fail, reiterate, go again. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, the idea that failure is part of learning is I don't remember hearing that in school when I was younger. So I think that if I am part of the generation of people who are being reskilled, coming in and trying to do something I know I'm not good at may just keep me from ever walking in the door. I feel like my mind has been changed because I've worked in this space for so long, and I've heard learning theorists and people talk about that, but many people who have to be reskilled haven't heard that philosophy and weren't raised in that philosophy.
Mm-hmm. That's a good segue into the second question. And the second question really focuses on non-technical skills. And so there's the learning opportunities. There's always the traditional things that you learn through your technical skills, but what are the non-technical skills that can be improved through these opportunities that are in demand by employers that are out there? I'm gonna call on somebody. No, go ahead, Melody.
At our location, Ingrid, what was really interesting to us is we hired student workers to work on the bus. And we had a couple of them that were on there. And the bus would go out to a variety of locations, elementary schools, middle schools, to give them the opportunity for 3D printing, vinyl printing, learn some of that skill set. And the student workers, when I first met them, stood in a corner, didn't talk, had their heads tilted down, didn't make eye contact. And after working on the bus for a while and having some really good mentors and the managers that were there, their soft skills that they needed to go out into a job increased beyond belief. They were presenting to the chancellor of the college district. They were presenting in front of the mayor of the city. They were presenting in front of superintendents of school districts, and they were doing it flawlessly. So just having that opportunity to work in those spaces and to have mentors to help them learn that skill set was incredibly helpful.
Yeah, no, Melody and Ingrid, I definitely agree on the communication endpoint, because a lot of people right now are doing this, right? And when it comes to non-technical, it's this communication, and how can certain individuals communicate their solutions in front of little square boxes, right? And so I think that some non-technical skills is obviously this communication era where it might not even be the Gen Zs. It might be myself, a quote unquote millennial who maybe is in that point where I'm looking to reskill and transition. And one thing that I was always accustomed to was meeting people in person. And now and beyond this, it's going to be this. It's going to be us talking like this and conducting projects remotely. And so it definitely changes your whole mindset. And I mean, I think that in general, majority of the world has gone through this, and we've kind of positioned ourselves to be in a perfect remote setting. So yeah, communication is key. And it's even more vital than ever before because there's so many people that don't make that eye contact. And this is kind of helpful, I think, getting taking the video off and seeing the background too.
Very true. And David, you're with Tallow, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So,
Yeah.
so one of the things that you guys do that works with our students, and I haven't even shared this with Dr. Graveen yet, is your platform enables students to be able to talk about not only their academic skills and what they've learned and everything else, but some of the social enterprises that they've been involved in, which are great representations for employers when they're looking at, I am really interested in somebody who has this specific kind of experience. And while you guys started with younger population in high school, we're beginning to work with you to move up through college students and people returning to the workforce.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, our population is growing and our population is aging as well. And so it's important to know that those 22 and 23-year-olds that have finished university, they're still on Tallow, and they need to be educated on various positions that could potentially propel them to, help desk individual in an IT firm and moving all the way up to supervisor or manager. So there's a career path that these students just are not seen. And yeah, we're here to help, and we're excited about working with Base 11. So it's, yeah.
It's interesting, and you just raised something when you talk about the different pathways that students can take. I have a feeling that sometimes when they hear the word STEM, the first thing they think is, I don't fit in that box because I'm not this enough or I'm not that enough. You look at the 4.0
GPA,
Right,
so,
right. Yep.
And
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Ingrid, sorry.
No, please, Shalani.
I was just thinking,
Telling me.
one of the things that I think is so important with project-based learning opportunities, and this is something Abby touched on in her slideshow presentation as well, is that skills that we need to learn is just increasing, right? The evolution, the turnover of the skills that we need to learn. And I think that when we're doing project-based learning opportunities versus, as Sir Maud was saying in the comment section, doing like standalone courses where you're just, maybe if you're reading off a textbook, you're not able to easily pivot and you're not developing the skills to evolve the way you would be if you're in a project-based setting. So it's not exactly a technical skill, but it also is in the sense that, you do need to be able to pivot and to understand why a change is happening and what's the reason behind the skill set change. So yeah, I mean, that's another thought that I was just having as David, you were talking.
Absolutely. Okay, anybody else that wants to sort of weigh in here on project-based learning opportunities and how they can help folks contextualize what they're learning? All right, we will move to the next question. Maybe. Literally, maybe. Okay. So question 3, and just to warn you guys, we only have 4 of these. Let's talk about how these opportunities can be leveraged to connect the new employees to the work culture of the company and promote inclusivity.
I could start off.
I'd love that.
So I think that if we're doing a project-based learning program, you're able to bring in the opportunity for you to talk about your personal experiences as well. So, I mean, just my background, for example, I mean, I studied international agriculture and rural development at Cornell, having been born and raised in New York City in a completely like non-agricultural setting, and then moving to Ithaca where, you know, there are farms around me. But I think I did think about food differently and the connections differently, and my colleagues or my peers also thought about food differently based on where they're from. So seeing how different approaches can change, I think is very important, and that comes out more in project-based opportunities, especially when you're trying to learn and work with a team. And I was wondering if there is, you know, if anyone here on the participants list, even people who haven't spoken yet, could talk about, you know, examples of seeing how inclusivity has been something that has been considered or talked about through these opportunities, if they've had any option for that, if there's any space that's been made particularly for that, especially in these current times. I think it's really important that we do something around that.
So we have tried to use the makerspace as an opportunity to explore the different, the diverse student population that we have at our college. I think the first year that we had the mobile makerspace come out, and we kind of did, we did the hard opening 2 years ago in December. The soft opening was right as school started. We had the Puente group on our campus use it for Hispanic Heritage Month. And so we did some things with altars and with Day of the Dead. And this year, the crew actually explored leading Latinx figures and did bios and created a web page so that you could go out and learn who everybody was and who some of these Latinx leaders were. And so they're doing it for Black History Month. They're doing it for another of other constituent groups that we have on our college. And I think just learning about the other groups and having the chance to do a project where you're learning about the other groups is really impactful.
Melody, I'll add, I think that we've seen all the statistics around the importance of diversity in just in leadership and the impact that it makes overall, personally and on your business and everything else. And I think project-based learning really enables that, because oftentimes you pull together very disparate groups of people that normally may not have that interchange. And when they do, all of a sudden, it really builds upon their capabilities, their capacity, their ability to just, when they go into the workforce, feel more inclusive because they've been through this process of working with others.
You know, I know in my role helping develop strategic partnerships for Base 11 and working with our corporate partners, in some of the conversations we've talked about, and we talk with talent acquisition teams as well as the STEM teams and the CSR teams, there are oftentimes people who are genuinely trying to make the effort to increase the diversity in their workspace, but come to us and say, you know, we can't find people in this particular region of where we are, or we've tried, but we're not hitting the metrics that we set for ourselves. And one of the questions that we ask back is, you know, if you continue to go to the same places you've gone for the last 10 or 15 years, or you are only having your current employees network with who they know from their school or wherever, you might continue to get the same result. And it really needs to be an intentional focus on going to the places where you know that there are a diverse group of students, and then broadening their networks. And I think that by being really intentional about that and really identifying groups like Base 11 that are working with those high potential, low resource students, getting some people through the door really broadens, it turns that door into a hallway, into a giant, conference room or something, where it's just, you have so much more room for more people. And these are the opportunities you know, bringing a project in and opening it up to people outside of your own industry. So if you have employees that are there for you and say, hey, you know, some people who are interested, bring them along, let them see, let them experience, let them, you know, network. Because the single biggest thing that we keep hearing, and we just had our conference recently, is how many years people have gotten to job opportunities through their personal networks. And there are just groups of people. If you are a first generation college student, you are not coming in with the same type of big industry network that maybe a student who has come from 3 or 4 generations of college educated, you know, folks. So I'm just trying to think through, how do we use these opportunities not only to widen the pool of diverse, talented people for our industry and our industry partners, but then use the employees they do find to, you know, continue to broaden the network.
Interesting.
And it would be interesting to see, sorry, it would be interesting to see how many project-based opportunities are done by corporations in a regional setting. So, because I'm thinking, like, if you're focusing on a specific region and you're trying to roll out a program that way, then there's room to talk about, well, what are some issues in your community, right, that you think you can try to solve through your project-based, right? And then you can talk about the importance of, you know, elevating your community and how these skills can help do that. And that could even be a stepping stone for not only for those employees who are working on the opportunity to learn, you know, I'm not thinking about a specific project in mind, but like something that, you know, that they can focus on that could help with their communities. If they do roll it out, then not only are they learning from the skills and feeling empowered to help their own communities, but also I imagine that people who are within their communities, maybe even younger generations, are able to see the impact that this organization has had in allowing people to solve their own problems, right? There's something about that I think is very empowering. And Amatria Sen, I'm reading his book right now, and he talks a lot about this. There's like 5 freedoms that you look at, and this is maybe going off on a little tangent, but this idea that you're building the capacity for someone else to solve their own problems is very, very key in the development space. And I think that sort of thinking should also be applied here when we are looking at project-based opportunities, because then you feel that the company is, you know, bringing that inclusivity not only to those not only to their employees, but the identities that the employees, you know, hold.
Yep. Okay, we got a 5-minute mark. Shalini, those are great. I need the name of that book. So if you could text that to me, I would appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Sounds really interesting. Really interesting.
It's called Freedom as Development.
Freedom as Development. Okay.
Thank you. I just wrote you individually, so thank you.
All right. So the last question, which I find very interesting, is, you know, let's talk about the challenges in developing work-based and project-based learning opportunities. The challenges, and then even more importantly, how we can address those challenges.
Well, I think with anything, it's just you know, awareness, really. And you know, I find that a question before that, the question number 3 I was going to ask is, how many people, and we'll kind of talk about this in question 4 too, but you know, especially with Base 11, when you're discussing things with the HR teams or CSR teams, for instance, how many of those organizations actually have like a mentorship program? And because that's just such a phenomenal way of again, getting the word out, developing those work-based projects and understanding those opportunities out there. Because if I'm a mentor and I went to Michigan State University, perhaps I can talk to our business, you know, the communications department or the engineering department at MSU and say, hey, these are the things that we're doing at Tallow. We love to find some additional people on the marketing, the UX, the I, you know, all of that. So again, mentorship, and the biggest thing to be addressed is obviously just that awareness piece, which is so important.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
David, I was just thinking, we you know, quite a few of the partners that we talk to have internships. Some have mentoring programs. Some have apprentice programs. One of the things, and I don't know that everybody always sees that these two things are connected, but the issue of paid internships and unpaid internships is a big one when you're talking about diversity and inclusion, because we have so many of our first generation college students and students who are people of color who have to work.
Yeah.
And they have to have some income coming in. And if their only opportunity to do an internship and get that on their resume is to take an unpaid internship, those are sometimes just not manageable decisions that they can make. We have, parents, we have single parents, we have a lot of different people that they have responsibilities that they have to pass up on that unpaid internship. And then that just begins the widening of the gap, right? So the people who can take the unpaid internships, they're building up their resume. They're getting the opportunity. They're meeting people and building networks for hire. So I would strongly urge people who, and I do think that's a challenge. I would strongly urge people who are trying to increase their diversity and inclusion in their talent acquisition to consider having at least some scholarship positions or some paid internships, because that will broaden your talent pool.
Well, and then same with, the reskilling component as well. I get it. There's packages that need, and there's organizations and companies that ultimately need to keep their lights on too. But when you think of an individual that has to work during the summer and but wants to learn about or wants to be a part of a project, and they need that for their experience, but it's $2,500, that's a problem. It's a challenge. And so, I feel like there are some opportunities that organizations are providing to reskill, upskill some students, and or, the people that are going back into the workforce. But, again, the financial burden can be a challenge as well.
So I would think that the financial piece is a huge piece, kind of across the board. I know they're running some of the spaces that we do and helping with the pieces that are part of projects costs money. And we are a community college, so finding that money and finding those partnerships is always a challenge. And I think the other piece of it is finding a willingness for our industry partners to work with us on those non-technical skills that we talked about in question 2. Because I know people want to get workers that are job ready instantaneously when they come in. In my experience, that's not realistic. But if I can partner with you and we can do those things like internships, we can help to create that worker that's going to be ready for you when they come in the door.
Yeah, Melanie, I'll add one thing. Let me just highlight our partnership with Deso, for instance. So they're very clear about what they want. They want students who know how to use SolidWorks and CATIA and come into the workforce. And so the projects that we've worked with them on, which are also available soon at Moreno Valley College, are things like autonomous systems engineering academies. The students that go through that have the skills that they need to be able to enter the workforce. They get credentials. They have multiple off-ramps. They can go on and be a rocket scientist one day. But forming those industry partnerships where we reverse engineer industry person, what do you need? What do you really need coming through that door? And then working with colleges and universities to make sure that those are provided in a project-based learning kind of environment, experiential learning. I have 27 seconds left, and so I thought I'd take all that up.
Go.
Well, thank you all for a session. We're about to get pushed in 10 seconds now. I really appreciate this conversation, and I hope you all connect with each other even after this, and yeah, make some great things happen.